You can obviously sell at any point, pre-revenue, pre-users. You can sell it at the idea stage. You could sell it as just kind of some notes on the back of a napkin if you really want to. I mean, at the end of the day, if people are interested at that stage, then that's fine. But the further you push it, obviously the more valuable it becomes.
All right, so for the second part of this Q&A gamut, we have Helen Ryles. I've linked to our last conversation with Helen. She was super generous that time, and I'm really glad to have you back. How's it going, Helen?
Yeah, it's going well. Nice to be back again. Ready to have a chat.
Do you want to give us a quick self-introduction?
Yeah, sure. So I guess my background really is mainly as like an IT engineer. I worked for around about 15 years as either an IT engineer or an IT project manager. And kind of alongside full-time roles, I kind of built a sort of suite of lots of different side projects, ranging from things like ebooks and Slack bots and plugins and physical products. And over about 10 years, I think, kind of made around about 40 or so of those. And over the years, I've also sold quite a few. So I guess I'm kind of approaching this from the side of the maker, the sort of serial side project creator, really. Somebody who likes getting something from an idea stage from 0 to 1, launching it, getting users, and maybe even selling it too. So yeah, I guess my kind of experience is as a maker and just seeing ideas through from creation through to selling them to other people as well.
Do you have a process you're following? Are there patterns you notice about what makes a side project sellable and how to get it sold?
Yeah, I think it kind of comes back to what Andrew was saying, is it depends on when you're ready to. I guess sometimes you find that you don't necessarily have the time to maintain it. You need to kind of look at your reasons why. Have you lost interest in the idea? Have you kind of taken it as far as your skills have got to? So once you've kind of settled on that decision of actually selling, you've actually got to also put in the time to sell it. So sometimes people want to sell a business because they're too busy, but they don't necessarily have the time to actually go through the process of selling it. So just making sure you've got the time just to gather things together, to do the due diligence that's necessary, or even just respond to people who are interested, because you won't always necessarily sell to the first person you speak to. You might have to go through lots of conversations. There might be kind of delays in that and sort of time between first conversation and actual sale. But yeah, and just in terms of deciding when to sell something, I guess it's when you're ready to, when you've kind of reached the end of the life of the project, or you've kind of done as much as you can on it, really.
What are some of the side projects that you've sold? Maybe give us some examples of what's possible.
Yeah, so I think the first, actually, I think I started by buying one, actually. I bought a sort of a Slack bot, which was kind of a bit of a complement to another Slack bot that I was working on. They kind of worked well together. And I ended up selling those on both as kind of a pair together to the same person. So other things I've kind of sold include things like a service business, which was for podcast transcription. So I did that for a while. Got it up to a couple of $1,000s monthly recurring revenue. And then it was a choice of either kind of growing that and taking on employees, or moving to a full-time role. And that particular time I moved to kind of a full-time role, so I kind of needed to hand that off and make sure that the customers that I had at the time were sort of taken care of by the new owner, really. So yeah, I guess it can be anything from as Andrew was saying, it can be agencies and service-based businesses, even things that are something that somebody else could pick up. So things like, even potentially, if it's not kind of specific to yourself or overly branded to your own name, then maybe information products and things like that. So if you've got kind of like downloadable things as well, I've kind of sold things like that, sort of like PDF downloads, things like that. So it's quite a wide range, and I'm always kind of interested to see what things people actually want to sell, or things that people are not sure if they can sell. And most of the time you can normally find a way of finding a buyer, whether that's just for the domain or the source code, or even just for the social media side of things too. So there's lots of ways you can package and reconfigure a business that would be interesting to other people too.
For the projects you've sold, has it been more outbound, you going to find the buyer, or has it been more of inbound, the buyer coming in to buy it from you?
Yeah, I think it's been mostly inbound, honestly. I think because they're more on the smaller side, they weren't kind of, multi-million pound businesses, or even,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, they were all quite small businesses. I wasn't actively, speaking to business brokers or things like that. I wasn't kind of like speaking to the larger organizations that would necessarily take up my time. So my kind of approach really was to decide that I was looking to sell a project, list out all the things that were included in the sale, post in various communities and groups, and also speak to friends who were interested in kind of acquiring things. And then from there you start off with kind of lots of different conversations. So you may get a couple of conversations with friends, you may get people reaching out to you on Twitter. I think it's just a case of making sure that people are aware that you've got something that you are looking to either pass on to somebody new, or to kind of break down into its component parts. Yeah, I guess my approach is kind of almost a bit of a passive way of doing it. There's definitely more proactive ways you can go about doing that, but again, it comes down to time. I have posted businesses for sale and then not really thought about them for a couple of months, and then it's only when you kind of get messages that you kind of realize that it just took a little bit of time before people kind of see what it is you're offering. So yeah, I guess as much time as you want to put into it, that will start more conversations really. But there's nothing wrong with kind of putting something up for sale and kind of leaving it there even as you continue to run the business. It just starts conversations, and hopefully leads to some interesting kind of relationships, and hopefully a sale too.
Is there anything you can do or have done to bait potential buyers, make yourself look attractive and attract that attention?
Yeah, I think if you are using platforms like MicroAcquire or things like that, then you've got to kind of put the effort into the listing of the actual business. So making it clear what's included, making sure that you've kind of at least thought about the questions that people will ask you. Why are you selling? What's included? What kind of issues and stumbling blocks the business has had. So not necessarily painting 100%. It's not about painting a perfect picture of a particular business. It's kind of about being honest and making sure that people are aware of what they're kind of buying into. So if you say that, you kind of have kind of reached the end of your marketing ideas, or you don't like doing the sort of general day-to-day maintenance, just kind of being honest. It doesn't necessarily have to be all positive. You can include the sort of genuine and authentic reasons why you're kind of moving on from that business. And just kind of giving a complete overview of the scenario that you're in, really, just so that you don't necessarily waste their time with lots of back and forth basic questions. You can kind of circumvent the need to have all those different conversations with people if you include that in the listing up front. Being available for a chat, just hopping on a Zoom call, it helps to know that there's a real person behind the business, and just talk to people, really. So yeah, I kind of do that a lot. But in terms of kind of attracting buyers, I think again it just comes back to are you kind of advertising it for sale in various different places? Have you tried different tactics? I even go as far as sometimes just to actually just list the business for sale as a product on your own website, and that actually surprisingly does work. You don't actually have to, if it's something really small like a domain or a landing page or something really basic, you don't necessarily have to go through huge kind of due diligence, and especially if it's kind of pre-revenue. It can be a product that somebody buys, same as we would buy a domain name from any other domain registrar, really. So yeah, just put yourself out there, making sure that you communicating that you've got something to sell is the best way to attract people that are looking to buy, really. And you'd be surprised at kind of the people you wouldn't necessarily think may be interested and be in the market to purchase something.
Jacob from the chat asks, is MicroAcquire the only platform you post on, or are there other platforms where you've posted your side projects for sale?
Yeah, actually, MicroAcquire isn't one I've used yet, but is one I definitely I'm planning on doing that in the future. I'm just having a quick look at the list of places that I've sold in the past. So Indie Maker, Side Projectors, there's also No Code Exchange as well. I'm sure there's probably more recent ones. It's probably a couple of years since I last sold a side project, and those were kind of the platforms at the time. I know people have used places like Flipper to sell domains and things like that. I've never really had a kind of sort of a successful outcome, but I know that the platform's changed a lot recently. And obviously you've got the larger business brokers like sort of FE International and things like that. And it's great to see this sliding scale really of, the large multi-million-pound businesses and up down to the smaller ones as well. So I think we're getting to the stage where there is definitely a platform that's right, whatever stage your business is at.
What was the last one you said?
So we've got Indie Maker, Side Projectors, No Code Exchange, Flipper, and FE International.
FE International, thanks. All right, yeah, Alex, just try to request again. Sorry, buddy. So you mentioned no code exchange. Is there any difference selling a no code project versus a code project?
Yeah, I think in some respects, sometimes no code projects are actually easy to sell. You've got to remember that the person taking over your business has actually got to maintain it as well. So if you've picked a really obscure tech stack to build your project in, you're really narrowing the market of who can take that over. You've got to find somebody who is willing to pay for a developer or have those skills themselves. So a no-code business can be run by anybody. Then, if you kind of break down the components and say which apps it is that you run your business, then you kind of actually reaching a wider market of people because, especially if somebody's a developer and they have got those additional skills as well, they could rewrite the whole platform themselves and take kind of a seed of an idea and build it into something larger. So yeah, I think sometimes people think no code businesses are harder to sell because they're perhaps easier to replicate, but sometimes it's about the time saved. It's about the core idea of the business, the customers that you've got, the branding that you've got, and all the different kind of components that go together to make a business. So yeah, I guess I would definitely advise people who've got no code businesses to consider passing them on to new owners if they're kind of reached the end of their time working on something.
How do you evaluate a business for sale? How do you decide what to advertise it for? What is it worth?
Yeah, I guess if you are at the stage of having revenue, then that does help in some respects. There's lots of formulas and different kind of multiples that you can kind of work out based on monthly recurring revenue. But it's kind of difficult because, say, for example, I had a product that was like a physical product. You've got the cost of making the product, you've got the cost of shipping the product. And if it's kind of something that's did quite well on like a product hunt launch or something like that, then that's a kind of a one-time sale. How can you? It's quite difficult to value businesses, that with one-time sales based on kind of the revenue alone. So, and especially for pre-revenue businesses as well, I kind of tend to look for things like how easy is it for somebody to replicate it? How much time does it save if somebody wanted to rebuild this out themselves? What unique things have you got to offer that, again, saves people time, whether you've got a long list of customers, even if it's free users, they're all valuable assets that you can use to work out. And sometimes it can be just a case of what time have you put in yourself? What would you really like to get out of the business? You can list a business for whatever you want to sell it at, really. It's worth what anybody will pay. So you can easily list it at a higher price and bring it down later. There's no harm in posting something for sale at whatever it is worth for you to actually go through the process of the sale, really, and the time that's involved, and maybe even helping out and consulting after the sale is done too. So post it for whatever you think it's worth, and you can always change that later, and you'll be surprised at how valuable the assets that you've got are.
Next question is from Ali. Ali, you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hello, Anthony. Hello, Helen. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I'm sorry for the missed calls by Chrome. So I'm in now. And actually, I had a question. It was on the brain rate, and it was actually a follow-up question on Kofi's great question, how to find the perfect persona for the buyer. So what I faced, if you remember this scene from Silicon Valley when they were talking about brain rate, and people like Peter Levels are talking about it all the time, and I'm thinking that this is something that can never happen to me until it did happen to me. So I just wanted to hear more about the brain rape and how to spot somebody who doesn't want to buy the business, who just want to, know your secret or something, and how to deal with them. So I believe that this is something important for especially new founders because they get excited when somebody asks to buy the business. So I would love to hear more from you, Helen. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I guess it comes down to making it really easy for people to buy. If you don't want people to waste your time, then you need to make sure it's clear that in the listing, all those questions they want to spend the time asking you about, you can kind of point them to the listing and make sure it's a really thorough, detailed overview. And then it comes down to whether they want to buy or not. You don't need to have any further discussions at that point. If you've answered all their questions, and they can literally click a button to purchase it, and you will send over all the assets and then transfer the domain later. You can really cut the actual purchase, down to a really short transaction. And what you'll tend to find is people who are really enthusiastic at buying, as soon as you give them that opportunity, then there may be a few weeks where it goes quiet, and it may take a little while before they actually come back to you. So just making the process as simple and straightforward as possible. Think of all the questions that they're going to ask you so they don't waste your time, and so that you don't waste theirs as well, because you don't want to have the same conversation 10 times over. And you don't want also to be kind of a bit jaded by the process when the right buyer comes along. You want to be as enthusiastic with the first person as you are with the actual person who does end up buying it. So yeah, make the process as simple as possible, and make sure that you give as much information up front so that it's just really simple, straightforward, and then hopefully they can move on to bothering somebody else instead of spending your time.
Thank you so much, Helen. This was really helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem, Ali. Thanks.
Hiya, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've seen the list of your projects, and it's amazing how many you've took part in over the years. I see that you've listed a couple as they were sold during the landing page stage and before launch. Does that mean you started a lot of these projects with the intention to sell?
That's a good question. I don't think I did. I think they were always kind of ideas that I was interested in pursuing myself. I think it's sometimes that conversations come out during the building phase, especially if you're kind of interested in building in public and kind of sharing what you're interested in. And then people catch up with you and ask you where you're at with a particular project, and you may not have had time. And then they're kind of saying, well, that particular domain would be really great for the project I'm working on, or I really like the landing page that you've got, and I want to kind of move on from that. And you can kind of say, well, I've got 5 other things I'd quite like to work on. Do I mind, if I've got somebody who's interested, you can easily kind of sort of make that quick sale, really. So yeah, I guess it's all part and parcel of making sure that you're sharing what it is while you're actually building it as well. There's a temptation to wait until things are perfect, and that in fact you actually get better feedback if you share things a little bit before they're actually ready. You get more, perhaps interested people who are interested in doing something similar. You're surprised by how many competitors spring up as soon as you start mentioning what it is you're working on. Yeah, so just make sure that you're telling people what it is you're doing, and it's possible to sell a business at any stage, even if it's kind of literally just got out of the ID stage and it's just a landing page and a domain. Yeah. Because I think sometimes just being in motion, that kind of act of being in motion and building things, encourages other people to kind of do the same, really. So yeah, you get kind of lots of conversations, and being part of communities is a big thing as well. Being in touch with like-minded people, other makers, and those kind of conversations come naturally.
Yeah, I just found it interesting, especially, like you said, it's very close to the idea stage. Normally, you feel like a lot of acquiring happens after some sort of validation, whether that's customers coming through. But I guess, like you said, I'm guessing a lot of the early acquisitions that happened just past the idea stage were from fellow developers that saw, an opportunity like, hey, I can merge this with my product. This is going in the right stage. And seeing that you're full of ideas, you probably thought, what, let me check this one off. Let's go on to the 50.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. If you've got a lot of ideas, it's kind of, if the part of the business that interests you, like it is with me, is kind of getting something off the ground, then I'll have more ideas in a day than I can ever build in my sort of entire life, really. So it's important to kind of decide where your interests and passions lie, and if something has got a potential with somebody else who wants to kind of move on from it, then that's a success too. So I kind of look at even small sales as wins and positive exits, really.
Okay. Yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jacob.
What are the logistics you need to think about when selling a side project?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess there's just two sides. There's obviously the buyer side and your own side, and kind of one, making sure you've got the time to prepare things for sale, thinking about why the buyer actually wants to buy. If you've got somebody in mind, doing your own due diligence. It could be that they are a competitor and just don't want your product to exist anymore, and you've got to kind of think, do I want this person to buy my product? It may be a good offer, but sometimes you may not necessarily want that person to buy it, so they may not be the right person for you. So yeah, just kind of thinking about what you would like this product to become, where you would like to see it in future, and sometimes you would rather sell it for a reduction in price to the right person than to somebody who isn't the right fit, or takes a long time to kind of get back to you, or things like that. So sometimes a simpler sale or the right person is the best route to go. It's not always necessarily about whoever bids the highest and things like that. So yeah, just doing your own due diligence, really. And I guess sort of like thinking about why you want to sell yourself. Is it because you want the product to kind of continue on? And also whether you'll regret selling it. There's definitely been projects that I've sold at the time because I felt I needed to. And I think you'd be surprised at how putting your product together to sell can actually reignite some of that interest again. You think, oh, that's a really good product. You kind of sell yourself on your own project again. So don't be surprised if you kind of feel a little bit enthused as to kind of, oh, I could just do that one more thing and that one more. Once you get into the project again, start looking through the assets, you kind of realize how far you've come. So yeah, not sort of making sure that you're ready to sell, deciding who you want to sell to as well.
Next question from Greg.
Hi, Helen. Thanks for doing this. Sounds great so far. I just had a quick question about, suppose you have like a warmed up domain for a service business that you've been sitting on for a while and it's just not going anywhere. Would you try to sell that domain? And if so, what steps would you take?
Yeah, so I guess firstly, I would kind of compile all the things I have associated with that domain. So is there any branding, other kind of any ideas, is there any copy that you could write to put up a landing page and make it seem a little bit further along in the process? Just
to be clear, it's a fully existing landing page. It's for a service business that existed, just didn't blow up. Yeah,
that's fine. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's the same thing as collecting all those things. Do you have the social media handles on various different platforms? If you haven't yet, you should probably go and get those, because they're all part and parcel of packaging something small into a larger whole entity, really. What can you do to kind of like make the potential buyer succeed if they were to kind of carry on with this? Maybe identifying the reasons why it didn't kind of become as successful as you'd hoped. Is it kind of you just don't have the time to do the marketing, or maybe it's not necessarily the right niche, and just maybe even kind of packaging those kind of industry knowledge and that those research ideas and that kind of future marketing plans all become valuable into making kind of a bit of a catalogue of a product, really, as opposed to kind of just selling a domain with a landing page. It could be a suite of 10 to 20 different things, but then it's worth a lot more to a potential buyer. So you've kind of really kind of researched the hell out of a niche, and then you've packaged that knowledge and that information up for somebody who wants to kind of continue on with it, really. So push it as far as you can, spend as much time as you're willing to spend on it, and I'm sure you'll find a buyer at that particular point. Yeah.
And then what do you think is probably the best places to try and see if there's interest for something of that nature?
That's a good question. I guess it depends on the niche that it's in. If there are any communities that you're a part of as part of that industry niche, that would probably be a good place to start. Perhaps finding the people with the necessary skills to run that business. Because I sort of, as Andrew was saying, there's such a wide variety of different kind of businesses for sale on these acquisition platforms that if you can target your sale to the right niche and the right people with those kind of particular skills. So if it was built with a particular tech stack, you know, advertise it in those kind of forums and communities, you're kind of going straight to the people with those skills. But also just making sure that you're kind of covering a wide range of bases, because sometimes you'll get serious inquiries coming from kind of like the most obscure places. So yeah, I would definitely kind of target the most specific ones first, based on the tools that the sort of site is built with, or the industry it's going to be in, and then kind of follow up with kind of a wider range of communities and platforms, and sort of also the official business postings on sites like Acquire too.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Is there any like minimum number of users or minimum amount of revenue or traction you should be trying to hit before you look for a sale?
You don't have to. You can obviously sell at any point pre-revenue, pre-users. You can sell it at the idea stage. You know, you could sell it as just a kind of some notes on the back of a napkin if you really want to. I mean, at the end of the day, if people are interested at that stage, then that's fine. But the further you push it, obviously the more valuable it becomes. So if you've got an interest to move that business further along, then it's probably a good thing to pursue that, because you're only kind of compounding the value that's in that product and that asset. And if you've got a mind early on that you're going to sell it, then set your project up so it's easy to sell. So separate, you know, the logins and the accounts from your own personal email addresses. Separate those sort of kind of the apps that you're using from anything that's sort of used in your own kind of other businesses or things like that. Separate the domain name so that it's kind of you know, you can pass those things on, even the email accounts and everything like that. Just kind of prep things for sales so that you're kind of moving the business along, getting a few more users, trying everything you can, because sometimes you may feel that you want to sell because you haven't hit the mark, the users that you wanted to get to, but a little bit more persistence will kind of get you there. So yeah, I would spend as much time as you have building out the business, prepare it if you know, for sale if you've got that in mind. But don't feel like you've got to get to a particular point before you sell it, because if you are completely done with something, then don't worry about being too early. You know, you'll know if people are interested or not.
The smallest project that you were able to sell?
So just, I mean, obviously, I guess domain names is the simplest one. Domain names with landing pages, you know, physical products that have launched on Product Hunt that have sold, you know, a few hundred items, things like that. Digital downloads, so things like I did like kind of a really minimalistic calendar for several years in a row, and that did, you know, that had probably, you know, some years there were you know, thousands of downloads, but they were free, and then some years there were hundreds of purchases at small, you know, just a few dollars each. But because it was something I did every year, there were kind of people who were kind of waiting for the next edition if they kind of got into a routine. So yeah, I mean, it can be as simple as just, have you got a PDF that's, you know, useful that somebody could acquire as a resource to be on their existing website. So if you know, if you kind of work in web design, have you got templates? Have you got kind of reusable assets that you can package up and sell? It may not necessarily be a business. You're kind of selling a product at that point. You're kind of selling something that becomes a resource. But yeah, it's again part of the sliding scale of sort of selling off those assets and recouping some of the costs and getting sort of money back from the time that you've invested yourself, really.
Awesome. Helen, thank you so much for coming here, for sharing your time with us. I put links to Helen's Twitter and also Andrew's up in the chat if you want to scroll up. Any parting words for us or advice that you want us to take home?
I know it's just been great to chat today, and if anybody has any questions, you know, I'm always interested in people who want to sell their projects or have in the past and got experiences. yeah, feel free to just add me on Twitter. I'm at Helen Ryles.